Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise to speak on a matter I believe is of extreme public interest. It's a timely issue, given the focus of the government in the budget on low-income families and supposedly sharing the benefits of the boom, and the fact that shaped last night's budget speak. I rise to speak on the current state of Newstart and other allowance payments in this country. The Treasurer acknowledged that working families are under pressure and reminded us of the important increases that pensioners had received to keep them above the poverty line, albeit being about $3 above the poverty line. I welcome a focus on low-income Australians, but I'm seriously concerned that the most vulnerable members of that group have been left out yet again. For the 1,200 Australians on Newstart, they've virtually missed out. There is the supposed $110 supplement. That's $4 a week. That's not even 1/10 of the $50 increase that we have been calling for, that businesses have been calling for, and that community support organisations have been calling for. We believe we should be prioritising helping the most vulnerable Australians by increasing Newstart by at least $50 a week. $210 a year is an insult to the people struggling to survive on $244 a week. That increase is a cup of coffee a week. Having just spent a week living on Newstart, I can tell you $4 is an insult. This payment will come in a $100 cheque twice a year. It is basically a handout, not an attempt to address the systematic problems that face those trying to struggle to survive on income support in this country, and to those Australians that are living below the poverty line. Those trying to survive on Newstart are living at $130 a week below the poverty line. Yippee, they're going to get $4 more a week. They'll be living $126 below the poverty line. As well as ignoring the urgent requirements to increase income support in last night's budget, they added insult to injury by moving single parents from parenting payment single onto Newstart, dropping their income support, making them significantly worse off from the allowance perspective, but also, as I articulated earlier today in this place, meaning that they are significantly disadvantaged when they are working part-time or seeking to work part-time. This is not delivering, in my opinion, on Labor values. This is condemning vulnerable Australians to poverty and making them even more vulnerable. For the single rate of Newstart, as I said, is $244 a week or $35 a day. That is $130 below the poverty line. After deducting the cheapest rent you could find in the outskirts of the metropolitan area, you are left with $17 a day. Now, that figure is based on information from a number of sources, both reviewing fairly recently ads in some of the metropolitan papers and advice from community service organisations. However, during the week, which I'll come to in a minute, that I spent living on Newstart, a report came out highlighting the fact that affordable housing is even more scarce than it used to be, and if you're living on Newstart, you can't afford to live in major capital centres in cities in this country, other than perhaps Adelaide and Hobart, if you can actually find some affordable accommodation. Just let's take the $17 a day, because that's the figure that I was using for my week on Newstart. That has to cover absolutely everything. Your electricity, your food, your clothes, personal care, household items, transport, phone bills, any other health crises, and you can forget car registration, car insurance, household insurance, any of those bills. You simply can't afford them. Look how this compares then to other people in the community, where average weekly expenditure for a single person under 35, excluding rent, is $84 a day, and the average weekly expenditure for a person over 65, excluding rent, is $53 a day. Any way you look at it, this is the absolute minimum amount you could live on. You can't live on it, in fact. During the week, I spent in April trying to survive on Newstart after allocating money for rent, utilities, all my train transport, some prepaid phone, because you need a phone because you have to participate in employment activities and look for work and respond to invitations or job interviews and things like that, and a bit of money for petrol, because in our major capital cities it is very hard to make all your obligations, unfortunately, on our poor public transport system. I was left, after buying some food, I was left for the week with $11.25 in my wallet. $11.25. There's certainly no takeaway coffee. There's certainly no entertainment. There was no expenditure on clothes. In fact, I needed to buy some more margarine because I ran out of margarine. I needed to buy some more milk because I ran out of milk. I needed some extra public transport trips. There was no money, and personal care items. There was no money for new clothes. There was no money for entertainment. And before someone says, oh, if you're living on Newstart, you shouldn't be entertaining yourself, you think about your personal life and what entertainment means to you. It means it brings you joy. It keeps your sense of hope going. It gives you social interaction. And one of the things that people living on Newstart find is they are increasingly isolated from the community. Increasing sense of hopelessness sets in as people are unable to survive, as the debt increases. Because what happens, because you can't survive on that amount of money, what happens is you end up maxing out your credit cards. You end up going to payday lenders and you end up in debt to your friends and your family. That is what it means to live on Newstart in this country, our supposed safety net. During the time that I spent on Newstart, I decided it was a bit pointless for me to pretend that I would do job search. So what I chose to do is talk to as many people who are trying to survive on Newstart as possible. I talked to and spent a lot of time talking with and visiting community support organisations that work with the most disadvantaged members of our community, that work with the most vulnerable members of our community. I met single mums, older workers who have been retrenched, young men and women, people living with a partial disability or living with a mental illness, migrants struggling with language. But not one of them said to me that that's what they want for their families, that that's what they want in their lives, that they want to remain unemployed because, hey, they're having such a good time living on Newstart. Well, let me tell you, they are not. Not one of the people that I met during that time said that they enjoyed living on Newstart. In fact, the reverse was very much the case. People told me of the sense of hopelessness, of the fact that they struggle to support their children, the fact that they want a better life for themselves and for their children. Many recounted their difficulties they faced in finding an employer who would take them on because of their unique circumstances. 60% of people living on Newstart have been there longer than 12 months and had faced multiple barriers to finding work. Unlike the stereotypes, these are often older workers, single parents, have a partial disability, and significant barriers that prevent them from walking into a job. As well as an increase in payments, people talk to me about the need for flexible services that empower them to succeed in their search for work, and more support and incentives and support for overcoming their barriers and gaining access to work. What they found was that they were lacking those support services from employment services, and many people, in fact, criticised the job search networks and their lack of support that they have received. In fact, the only place, and I'll come back to this in a minute, that people got support was from community support organisations. David, a retired army chef, who remembers when social security officers actually helped you find a job and have a job interview rather than shunting you from place to place. He recounted, he was an older worker, he recounted his multiple efforts to find work and also recounted the age discrimination that he is facing trying to find work, to the point when he applied for a job, he was told it was filled, only to find the next day it re-advertised. Do you know what that job was? It was a night fill job in a supermarket. And he was told that job had been filled. That is age discrimination. And the language learning classes, who were doing classes to improve their English. These are people who had been in the workforce before people start saying, oh, these are people that, you know, have only just come to Australia and they're taking all our money, etc., which is a nonsense argument. These are people who had been retrenched from the workplace and recognised that they need to improve their language skills and literacy skills so they could gain employment. And they were there so they could gain skills to find employment. And they recounted the difficulties they face. And Glenda, who has been out of the workforce as a full-time mum, who's now on Newstart, and that even though she went and found training opportunities, she was not supported by her job network, her job services provider. She was not given the training. Again, she was an older worker. She was not given the training even though she went out and identified it. One of the opportunities that I did have, and I will say here, it was a great privilege for me to spend time with this particular group of women, in fact, who are running Ready to Work in Western Australia. This is a not-for-profit, community-based organisation who helps disadvantaged women gain access to employment. And in fact, one of the things they do is provide 2 outfits to a disadvantaged woman that she can wear to an interview. And in fact, they provided me with this outfit. They're run by largely volunteers. They have volunteer stylists who work with women. And I can tell you, I spent a really good half day with them, and I felt good when I came out of that meeting, hearing the most amazing things that they do working with women. Because they don't just provide the outfits. They also provide help with CVs, interviewing techniques. What's that little bit of thing that you need to get you that job? This is a service. And I met a lady who'd actually just worked with this group, and she was just bubbling over with enthusiasm because she had achieved her outcome of gaining a training position, in fact, because she'd been helped by this service. This is a not-for-profit organisation providing this support. These women aren't finding it through the government-provided services or supposedly from the employment service providers. This is essential support for women to get that confidence, because when you've been unemployed for a significant period of time, particularly as a disadvantaged woman, there are many barriers you face. One of those is the confidence just to walk in the door to have an interview. Organisations like Ready to Work make a huge and visible difference to a job seeker's life in a way that they simply work with women. And I'll notice that this is a positive approach rather than a punitive approach. We need to rethink our approach to helping people into work and providing them with the assistance they need before they become entrenched in poverty, physically and mentally ill and desperate. And our job seeker networks will continue to act as a stick, beating the most vulnerable people in our community rather than using that as a lever to open doors for our unemployed. It is essential that we provide extra employment support services, that we increase Newstart so that people aren't living in poverty, because poverty becomes yet another barrier to overcome. We believe in a socially just, democratic society, one that should guarantee an adequate income safety net for all Australians and allows people to live in dignity even when facing some of the most toughest times of their lives. The complacency in leaving people to languish in poverty or trapping them in debt is unacceptable in what we say is a just society. The budget glazed over unemployment. It didn't address the most vulnerable Australians. The benefit of the boom cannot be said to be equally shared unless we direct those benefits to the most vulnerable in our community and guarantee them an adequate income and guaranteeing them the support they need to overcome their multiple barriers to employment. This country can never call itself a just country if we don't do that.
Expired.